Hello, this is our Rats with Team 4545 League, analyzing the game between Nitizen 2 and Rookmaster 23. This was played in Team Event 53 in round 1 of the playoffs. So let's have a look. Okay, we got the Sicilian defense. Seen this a million times. Both sides are playing like super grandmasters. And the Nadorf. How does white handle this? Bishop e2. This is one of the slower lines. Black should have no trouble equalizing. But I don't think black played it correctly, according to their theory I remember. One time I was well prepared against all variations of the Nadorf. I spent a lot of time with it in the 1970s when it was all the rage, and then it kind of disappeared from play for a while and it's come back. The objective that black should be doing here is playing bishop e6 and then getting a rook to c8 and putting the bishop on c4. That's basically the strategy. Then he'll continue with his development, and let's see what happens. Okay, bishop e7, bishop e3, and now white starts launching his attack. Now I don't know where they left theory, but black hasn't done what I suggested. Let me just back up, and I want to illustrate the point. I don't remember if I'm exactly right on book. At some point, black does need to play bishop e7, but let's just go ahead and play bishop e6 now, and let me illustrate what I wanted to. Now I'm assuming white will go like he did in the game, and then castle, and then rook c8, and here you see the setup is that black is going to play bishop c4, and there's really nothing white can do about it. One thing I've seen done, one plan I remember is that what white does is avoids an exchange on c4 and plays it this way. This is a line, and I'm not really familiar with it anymore. You know, you're talking about me studying this opening in the late 1970s, 1978 to be specific, and 79 when I was using the Nadorf. But black shouldn't have anything to fear here. The position is basically equal. Okay, let's see exactly how it turned out though. Okay, bishop e3, and now as I was saying, white starts launching the kingside attack. That's normally what white tries to do against his Sicilian defense, is attack on the king side. I've got an illustrative game out of my past where white played on the queen side instead, and it's very interesting. But that's another story, another day. Okay, so black is not going with the conventional approach that I suggested. I guess maybe just didn't know the theory. But then again, this could be still a line, and it's a matter of preference. I'm just sharing what I know about it. And knight e8, and then here white's showing his intentions are to castle long and continue with his kingside attack. And now a little pressure on e4, but not as much as before because the knight's not on f6. And you have to like white here for a couple of simple reasons. He's got just a little bit more board room. White's got 3 pieces up to the third rank, and black has 2 on the second rank. Basically, white's completed his development here. The rook on h1 is developed because that's where it wants to be. White should be thinking about pushing on with h4, h5, and so forth. Black, on the other hand, hasn't developed most of his queen side. The rook and knight are still sitting there at home. The knight on e8 is technically developed because it had gone to f6 first, and it does have some influence on the board. It's helping to batten down the hatches on d6 and g7. But normally black will try to get some counterplay on the c file, and he's not there yet. He needs to play knight d7 and get a rook on the c file, or maybe think about pushing b4 at some point. But meanwhile, white's going to be doing his thing, shoving those pawns on the king side. Okay, so he follows through with what I suggested. Now, I know white didn't play h4, but it just screams to be played. Knight d5. It's just not the right moment for that. Okay. Why, you ask? Well, because the moment says you sent a G pawn down his throat. Let's get another one there. Timing is everything. It's nice to have the knight on d5, but it's not doing a heck of a lot else. What are we going to do? Take it for a bishop that can't move on e7? That's silly. It's a great square for the knight, but timing is everything. And maybe it's better to see if black will force us to go there. Okay, how do I mean by that? Well, suppose he plays b4. Now we go knight e5, and now we've got a threat. Okay, now yeah, black's getting some activity too, but we expect that. It's opposite side castling. Both sides are trying to checkmate the other king, right? So anyway, now we can continue with h4. I suppose black could play a4 here. It's going to leave this in the lurch. Black's going to have to deal with that pawn at some point. Maybe he'll sacrifice it, but white has resources here. Well, I mean, for one, you can just let him have this pawn, and that pawn's not going anywhere. It's a little dangerous, but we'll collect it later. If you're really nervous, you can probably do it sooner, but why bother? You've got action going over here. You know, you want to swing this rook over and give a checkmate, right? Right? Yeah, of course. Okay. Let's go back. So knight d5, it's a playable move. It's one thing that separates the rating classes. One reason, aside from the number of mistakes they make, it's one of those what we call tiny errors. There's better moves on the board that will give more options, and when you don't play a move that gives you a better option, the tougher your opponent, the more likely he's going to find the right replies, and eventually your small errors are going to add up against you, and you're going to be in trouble. Okay, and black liquidates it, and so white's got the bishop pair, but it really doesn't do him a lot of good in this position because they don't really have active diagonals. If you stop and look, right now this bishop is locked in behind this pawn, which in turn is keeping the queen locked in. This bishop has a couple diagonals. You can go to d3 and be pressuring h7, but black is hunkered down here defensively on the king side. He's going to be ready for white's attack, but the whole position calls for white's attack. Make black react to it. Keep black busy over here on the king side, and don't give him a breath of fresh air on the queen side to start his own little thing, okay? So let's see what happens. Knight b6. Now, this is intended to get the bishop pair back, okay? So it's still white has some choices here. If you don't want that to happen, let's see what he did. Yeah, knight a5. That stops it for now. But black's going to get a little more pressure here. So now, so far, the white attack on the king side hasn't gotten started, other than the pawn to g5. Now the black counterattack on the queen side has commenced. The knight's gone to b6 and the queen has gone to c7. Now it doesn't mean black's got a winning attack. It just means that black is following a plan and getting his pieces organized to where every move counts. And white can't afford to just sit here and shuffle around. He needn't be playing on the queen side. He needs to be playing on the king side. So maybe the alternative was just give up the bishop pair. Okay, we're back to h4. Now when he plays knight c4, now one drawback with giving up the dark squared bishop is that when you play h5, the g5 pawn hangs. So now you have to stop and take this guy off, right? And then where's the knight go? It's it can go to a5, I guess, and now it's pressuring c4, but black's got some activity here. He's got some pressure on b2. And why does black have some activity here? Well, it goes back to knight d5, the 13th move. It wasn't the best move. White needed to be getting his kingside pawns rolling. Okay. So anyway, knight a5, stopping it for now. Queen here. Now it's time for h4. But he found knight c6. I guess. Okay. why is white playing on the queen side? You know, and as I said at one point in the video, I have an illustrative game where white does play on the queen side, but the position calls for king side. And actually, the strategy, it turns out it's going to work, but things are going to go wrong a little later, as we'll see. So I can't fully criticize knight c6 simply because what white does work, but he would have had such a much easier time of it had he commenced an attack on the king side, and then black wouldn't have really had time to counterattack on the queen side. And black's got some activity there, so we've got to watch out for that. And so now I guess white's saying, well, I gave up the bishop pair, but at any moment I can get it back. Okay, well, that's spending a lot of time with that knight trying to trade that bishop off. Okay, quick quiz. Which knight is this? Is this white's king's knight or queen's knight? Can you tell? Well, let's retrace its steps. It came from a5. Before that it was on b3. And before that was on d4. And that was on f3. And that was on g1. That's a busy knight. It moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And then what are you going to do? Go take off a piece that moved once? That's that's moving it 6 times to take off a piece that moved once? Well, you know, it's the advantage of the bishop isn't all that clear. You know, you got a couple weak pawns here on dark squares, but white's not attacking on the king side, so the bishop's not really doing white any good. So reacquiring the bishop pair or the knight for the bishop doesn't really make sense here. So that's a big investment of moves to move that knight. Now, granted, knight it's only moved twice since the opening because the opening move said it makes it go to b3, right? So it's only moved twice since the opening, but still, it's a busy guy, and he needs a break. Okay, all right. So queen c3, attacking a pawn, and yeah, if you win a pawn, you win a pawn. So it appears that the white strategy has worked. Strategically, white is winning. And here I've criticized this play, but maybe it just goes to show that black didn't have much. I could go back and try to find more ideas. Apparently knight c4 wasn't a good idea because it ended up losing the pawn. What else can black do there to continue his pressure? He played queen c7, and okay. Basically, white's not threatening anything other than a trick on the knight. See, the threat is knight takes e7 check, and then win the knight on b6. So black needs to deal with that knight. It needs to find a new home. It didn't work on c4. How about a4? Now we're eyeballing c5. If we have to go somewhere. So I don't know if white wants to weaken his king position for this, but let's just have a look. I mean, I just bring this up because white can grab a passed pawn out of this, although it's not clear for the moment how that pawn advances. That it hangs a knight on c6 at some point. Not right away. Well, first it's black's move, but black can just blockade the pawn, right? Well, no, it's white's move. But d6, he can take it with the knight. You don't take the knight first because then with the queen, because then this pawn falls and your rook is trapped. But you just take it. Now you take it with the knight, okay? And you know, white's got some maybe have some tactics here. I don't know. e4 though. White can't give up that pawn. So what's going to happen is black's going to blockade that pawn with his knight at the next opportunity and make white prove what he's got. And he still hasn't started his kingside attack, so black should be okay here. All right, let's get back to the game. We've seen this, and like I say, it won a pawn, so black has made a mistake. And now comes the point where, unfortunately, white starts giving the game away, and black has a threat here. Can you see it? Pause the video. Okay, you've restarted. It's not black's move, but if it was his move, what do you want to do here? Well, what's guarding the knight on c6? And it's that pawn on d5. And if black takes that pawn with his knight, and no matter how white retakes, if white retakes, there's nothing guarding the knight, and the knight is picked up, and black's gained his pawn back. And I've seen this type of theme come up in so many positions where it's just good to sink it in your memory and see this, that an advanced knight sometimes can be lost to a tactic like this. So if white plays rook c3, then he doesn't lose the knight, or doesn't lose the pawn. He could even play knight takes bishop check, and then you're a pawn ahead. Now just put the queen on e4. That's a great square for the queen. It's difficult to see what black has here in compensation. Now it's still time for white to get going with this h4, h5 idea, then maybe g6 or h6 or anything, and maybe f4, whatever. Transfer this rook on d3 over to the king side. White's still got some attacking chances, plus he's a pawn ahead. Plus, he's got the bishop advantage for knight. So here, although I don't normally like to just go trade pieces off, there was nothing wrong with taking on e7 in this case, simply because it just gives white an easy free game. And if anything, like I say, he's still his pawn ahead, and it's up to black to prove something. And here's where black's proving ground is. Can he generate anything with his rooks and knight and queen against that while white's doing his thing? Okay, so let's see what happened. Rook b3. It's one of those impulsive moves, or hope chess. We're hoping that our opponent plays what we want him to play. Clearly what white's wanting to do is put the rook on b7 and pin the knight. That's what he's wanting to do, I would assume. But unfortunately it falls to that little tactic, and now white's lost his pawn back. And now look at how much the position has changed. White had potential kingside attacking chances ever since the opening ended, and after 12 knight d7, white played knight d5 and shifted over to the queen side, and the attack never arose. And it's not going to arise now because there's no queens. White doesn't have enough to attack here. If he had a couple extra knights on the board and maybe a bishop, he could do some kingside attacking. But there's just not enough wood on the board. So now the game is basically even. The match is tied 1-1, by the way. Or no, wait a minute. It's tied 1.5 to 1.5, and so this game determines who advances. And I'm not sure what happens in a tie break. I should be, but I was just so busy I couldn't find out. But white's, I'm assuming a draw. If white has to play for a win, he's in trouble. I don't know how the tie breaks work, but he's probably got at least a draw. Okay, so now look who's the one that got the queenside pressure. Black did. White had to create a weakness to get rid of the threat. And like I say, the game is basically even now, and a draw is a perfectly satisfactory result. Again, I don't know about the conditions, if draw's okay for black or not. I wish I knew. I should know, but I'm sorry I don't. But let's stop and take stock of this. Both sides have 3 pawn islands. Both sides have some isolated pawns. Black 1, white 2. Black has a backward pawn on the open file. A bishop ending could be okay for white, simply because there's some pawns on black squares, but that doesn't mean they're going to stay there. There's entry squares for the black king on the king side, and the white bishop may be having to cover that, and it's not exactly clear how white's going to assault those dark squared pawns in the center. So, like I said, the game is very even and probably a draw. And if you're trading pieces, it's probably just good to offer the draw. You know, even if it means your team goes out. Well, maybe not. I guess in a team game, you have to play for the team. You have to play for the win. But black's fully equalized here, and he might even be a little bit better because of that pawn center. And here white just falls asleep and overlooks a tactic. And now the bishop is attacked and has to move, and then b2 falls. It's kind of a shame to go from one pawn up with a promising attack to down to an ending where you're down a pawn. And now the best white can do is draw, and he kept playing, but it's a black game now. And as I said, the black king has entry squares on the king side, and he's a pawn ahead, so it's just a matter of time before something happens. Now obviously a bishop trade helps black, so you can't do that. And I'm not so sure about that, putting it up where it's weak, and it could be attacked. But black is still for choice here. If he doesn't play it, black's still going to play e4 check and get his king activated into the white position. So really, black has a winning ending here, and that king is just too powerful. And now the white king has assumed a defensive role. Hoping for a repetition and a draw. Well, what else? And black just starts redeploying everything. Now it's too bad that white doesn't have a trick here to save it. It would be nice to be able to play bishop takes here, but black has time to get back. And it's over. But I just wanted to point that out simply because some people overlook these things, and it can happen. Just want to remind you it's there. Remember that tactic. If you haven't seen it before, you learned something today. But naturally, most of you have seen it, but that's okay. You can still forget it. It can still come up in a game. Okay. Now the h5 pawn is doomed, and here white's just playing for a trick. Go ahead and take my pawn, I'll steal your bishop. But black saw that, and now white's saying, well, maybe I'll queen my pawn, it's nothing else to try. But there's nothing stopping the black pawn. It's just going in, and we're just getting a few show moves here, and then white realized that's over. But if he's going to play this long, he might as well try pushing the pawn. Who knows? Maybe black will ignore it and not take it. You never know. Mouse slip, whatever. But hopefully there's something to learn here. And the thing is, just when you have a plan, follow it, and don't kind of change plans in midstream. And the plan there was to go play on the queen side, I guess, to grab the bishop, or that outpost. It did get the bishop pair because black gave up his bishop on b7. But then the king side attack was started. G5 says I'm going to attack you. I mean, why didn't white try for h4? If he just does that instead of knight d5, save time for the attack. And as I said, let black push b4 and force white to go there. I'm not saying black will do it, but give black the option to go to do it. That's all. That's what I'm saying. So I hope everybody learned something. I thank you so much for your time. And that concludes the videos I needed to make for round 6 or round 1 of the playoffs. And I look forward to checking out what's in round 7. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.